It has become common for people to say that the present-day Jews are different from the ancient biblical Jews. The question is that true? No, it's not. Let us get into a quick history of the Jews. In the Bible, the Jews were known as the children of Israel, descendants of the patriarch Jacob, the son of Isaac and grandson of Abraham, whose name was changed to Israel. His 12 sons became the 12 tribes of Israel, and their story unfolds throughout the Old Testament. These ancient Israelites became slaves in Egypt, where they lived for 430 years, and were freed from slavery and led out of Egypt by Moses. They received the Torah at Mount Sinai on their journey from Egypt to the land of Canaan, which became theirs, and they built a kingdom centered in Jerusalem. As years went by, they had judges and then kings, and in the time of King Rehoboam, son of King Solomon and grandson of King David, the tribes of Judah and Benjamin formed the southern kingdom, known as Judah, which survived longer than the northern kingdom consisting of the other tribes and gave rise to the term Jew, meaning from Judah. Just before we go on, please note this. Of the 12 tribes of Israel, the tribe of Levi served as priests throughout the country and did not own land. Let's now continue. Centuries before Christ, the northern Israelite kingdom was scattered by Assyria, and later Judah, the southern kingdom, was exiled to Babylon in 586 BC, when the first temple was destroyed. Under Cyrus the Great, the king of Persia, around 538 BC, many Jews were permitted to return to Judah to rebuild Jerusalem and the temple. This was the time when Ezra and Nehemiah, both with books in the Bible, led the rebuild. Still, many remained in exile, and over centuries Jewish communities settled across the Mediterranean, the Middle East, and Europe, becoming the diasporan Jews. To understand whether the Jews of today are the same as those in the Bible, we must first understand what happened to them. The Bible closes its narrative long before the full force of exile unfolded. In the year 70 AD, Roman legions stormed Jerusalem and destroyed the Second Temple, the heart of Jewish worship and national identity. Tens of thousands were killed. Thousands more were enslaved or exiled. It was the end of Jewish sovereignty in the land of Israel, for the time being. Then, in 135 AD, after a final Jewish revolt led by Simon Bar Kokhba, the Roman Emperor Hadrian crushed all resistance. Jews were banned from entering Jerusalem, which was renamed Aelia Capitolina, and Judea itself was renamed Syria Palestina, a deliberate erasure of the Jewish homeland. From this point on, the Jewish people were scattered, not just spiritually but geographically. They became a diaspora nation, living in Babylonia, Persia, North Africa, Spain, Germany, France, and later Eastern Europe and Russia. But they never stopped being a people. Despite persecution, expulsions, and pogroms, Jews held tightly to their identity and to their memory of the land of Israel. Their scriptures, their prayers, and their traditions all spoke of return. Every year at Passover, they ended their Seder with the words, "Next year in Jerusalem." For nearly 2,000 years, the Jewish people lived in exile. Yet they never fully assimilated, and they never forgot who they were. Then, in the 19th century, history began to shift. Waves of anti-Semitism in Europe, pogroms in Russia, the Dreyfus Affair in France, convinced many Jews that their safety could only be guaranteed by reclaiming their homeland. This gave rise to Zionism, a movement not only political, but deeply rooted in religious and historical memory. And after the devastation of the Holocaust, the world could no longer ignore the cost of statelessness. In 1948, the dream became reality. The State of Israel was born, and the exile at last began to reverse. Jews returned in waves from Europe, from Arab lands, from Ethiopia, and from the Soviet Union, fulfilling the ancient hope that the people of Israel would return to the land of Israel. But how do we know that Jews who returned to the land of Israel are linked to those ancient Israelites? Modern Jews, whether Ashkenazi, Sephardi, or Mizrahi, share genetic, historical, and cultural roots with the ancient Israelites. Recent genetic studies confirm that most Jewish communities retain Middle Eastern ancestry, tracing back to the Levant, the ancient land of Israel. To trace the connection between modern Jews and the ancient Israelites of the Bible, we look beyond history and scripture and go into the realm of genetics. Multiple peer-reviewed studies have analyzed the DNA of Jewish communities, including Ashkenazi, Sephardi, and Mizrahi Jews, and found consistent links pointing back to a common Middle Eastern origin. In a 2000 study led by geneticist Dr. Michael Hammer at the University of Arizona, USA, researchers found that Y chromosome markers among Jewish men were closely related to those of Middle Eastern populations, including Palestinians and Druze, and distinct from non-Jewish Europeans. A decade later, in 2010, a landmark study by Dr. Doron Behar and colleagues analyzed genome-wide data from 14 Jewish populations. The conclusion? All Jewish groups share a common genetic origin in the Near East, and Ashkenazi Jews, despite living in Europe for centuries, are genetically closer to Mizrahi Jews from Iraq and Iran than to their European neighbors. Another key study in 2014 by Shai Karmai and colleagues showed that Ashkenazi Jews have a dual ancestry, part Middle Eastern and part Southern European, reflecting ancient migration and integration, not replacement. Even today, Israeli Jews, whether from Europe, North Africa, or the Middle East, continue to share genetic links with one another and with the ancient populations of the region. Through exile, dispersion, and return, the genetic trail confirms what history, tradition, and faith have preserved. The Jews of today are the descendants of the Jews in the Bible, connected by blood, belief, and belonging to a shared ancestral homeland. Jewish communities preserve distinct traditions like circumcision, Passover, and the Sabbath even in exile. These are not merely customs to the Jews. They are threads of identity, woven from biblical times into modern life. In biblical times, worship centered around the temple, with animal sacrifices led by priests. But after the temple was destroyed in 70 AD, Judaism transformed into a text-based religion, built around the Torah, the Talmud, and synagogue worship. This evolution wasn't a break, it was a survival. The heart remained the same: faith in the one God of Israel, devotion to the Torah, and the hope of return and restoration. Why then do some people still say that modern Jews are different from ancient Jews? Some of these claims come from confusion, others from religious or political agendas. Some Christian doctrines once claimed that Jews were replaced by the Church. But this view is not universally accepted in Christianity today, and many modern denominations reject it. Others promote the Khazar theory, arguing Ashkenazi Jews descend from Turkic converts. But modern genetics and historical records disprove this. Ashkenazi Jews, who are descendants of those who settled in Central and Eastern Europe centuries ago, still show strong links to ancient Israel. Fringe groups claim they are the true Israelites, denying Jewish identity entirely. These claims often ignore facts, and sadly, they're sometimes fueled by anti-Semitism. Despite exile, persecution, and centuries of dispersion, the Jewish people have survived and remained uniquely connected to their biblical heritage. Since the time of Moses, the time of the parchment scrolls, the times of judges, the time of kings, the times of worshiping at the temple, to the modern era of rabbis, of synagogues and digital Torah apps, the Jewish identity continues. The Jews of today may live in a different world, speak different languages, and use smartphones instead of scrolls. But they are undeniably the living continuation of the Jews in the Bible.